Stephen Bowen. Each of you has a particular perspective and interest in the outcome of question 4, and we'll start with Steve. Please explain your position on question 4 and the impact of its passage on the people of Maine.
Thank you. Thank you for your time today. Maine Heritage Policy Center obviously supports the Tabor Initiative. We drafted it. And you're going to hear a lot today about what it does, what it doesn't do, what all the different elements of it are all about. But I'm a big picture guy, so I'm going to sort of explain this in big picture terms. This is really a debate about how do we build prosperity in Maine? How do we create prosperity? And you're going to see, I think, as we go along here today, a difference of opinion about how we do that. We feel that the way you build prosperity is by growing the private sector of the economy, by growing businesses, by creating a business-friendly state with limited government and low taxes. There are others that believe you build prosperity by creating more government, growing government, using government programs to do these things. And so when we looked around the nation and figured out, well, how can we move Maine toward a state that has lower taxes, a more limited government, and a more robust private sector, we looked at these tax and expenditure limitation models, and they're in place in 30 different states. And so the model we looked at was in Colorado, and you're going to hear a lot about Colorado today. I wish the people from Colorado were to sort of defend the state, but we're going to hear a lot about Colorado. And I think it would be a great thing if what happened to Maine is what happened to Colorado. Let me walk through this, because you're going to hear some difference of opinion about this question. Colorado has a much lower tax burden than we do as a consequence of controlling the growth of state spending. They have lower income taxes, they have lower sales taxes, they have lower excise taxes, they have lower property taxes, they have lower unemployment costs. As a consequence of this, they have a much more robust business sector, recently rated by both Forbes and CNBC as the third most business-friendly state in the nation. On 2009 indicator of economic competitiveness, 9th in the nation. Maine, by comparison, was 47th. A much more robust private sector. And as a consequence of that, per capita personal income is far higher in Colorado than it is here. Private sector job growth, far higher than it is in Colorado than it is here. And the consequence of that is a higher standard of living for Colorado people. And this goes back to the question, how do you create a better standard of living for people? Do you create a robust economy and give them incomes and grow their incomes? Or do you grow government and use government programs to try and get those things accomplished? So what do you have in Colorado as a result of the prosperity that they have created? You have lower levels of poverty. You have lower levels of poverty among children. You have lower levels of poverty among the elderly. You have fewer people on government programs. You have lower infant mortality. You have a higher degree of immunizations for children. You have, you have better schools. And we'll go through this today, but the question really is about how do you create prosperity? How do you create prosperity for this state? And that's, I think, one of the key questions we're going to talk about.
Thank you very much, Steve. Cliff St. John.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for being here. I confess I found it difficult to get Maine people interested in this issue, and I think part of the reason is that many Maine people remember 2006, when this measure was very similarly on the ballot, and it was rejected at that time. You'll remember that in 2004, we had a property tax limitation on the ballot. That was likewise rejected. Many of the arguments are similar. And so we're hoping that people will again realize the potential danger to the state of Maine and will reject Tabor because its formula is, in fact, the same formula that has been in place in Colorado, and the damage that it did to Colorado is evident from the leadership of the state, the executive, Republican governor at the time, and Democratic legislative leadership with the business community leading a campaign in 2005 to persuade the voters successfully to suspend the operation of Tabor, to permit them to begin to reinvest in the public services that had been so damaged by 12 years operation of Tabor. Steve cited a lot of figures about Colorado, and I'm going to grant up front. Of course, they're a more prosperous state than we are. They were before Tabor, and they are now. But the rate of growth in Colorado during the time that Tabor was in effect was slower than their mountain state neighbors. So they're in a region of the country that has been attracting population because it's got a climate that is very attractive and people like living there, so they move there. And many of these indicators, national indicators, really track population growth and the resultant economic growth. If you look at per capita income growth, in fact, Maine's per capita domestic product, state product growth has been faster than Colorado's. So a lot of the figures that are cited have to do with their population growth. It's true, we haven't been seeing a lot of population growth, but that really is, in our view, a distraction from the point that people in Colorado determined that this was bad for their state, and that things like Colorado on contribution to K through education went from the middle of the pack to the bottom of the states. Things like immunizations have gone to the bottom of the states. Many other measures, aid to higher education. So we'll talk more about it.
Thank you very much, Kit. Senator Weston.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here at this lovely lunchtime. Beside my neighbor here is just coming into the legislature. I, on the other hand, am just going out. So I'm going to speak with some personal history. I was so proud to be elected the first time. My 2 kids were in high school. I had never run for any office, never served on a board, but I had been a parent, and I'd taken those skills, and my kids said, go for it. I went there with great hope because I knew my neighbors. I worked with them, helped them out, and as a legislator, I just continued to do that kind of work. And what I saw was people struggling. But every time a bill would come up in the legislature that said it was going to help people, actually took more away from others. And it didn't seem very balanced to me. I've had lots of time. I've supported lots of budgets, and I have voted against some budgets. But if I look back and ask, how did I help the people in my district the most? It's when I let them keep more of what they earned. Taxpayer Bill of Rights simply says, for a long time now, we have asked our legislature to listen to us, to let us thrive, but it hasn't worked because we are spending faster than our people can earn it. The Taxpayer Bill of Rights is saying, okay, now let's step back, give us a break. Let's look at other states, Colorado being one. I actually was with a senator and a representative from Colorado just 2 weeks ago. I got a very different picture. I got a picture of what I want Maine to be like. Every legislator that is elected wants to do the right thing. But we are convinced when you get into that culture, under that dome, that to grow government and make decisions for our constituents is the only way to do it. Taxpayer Bill of Rights says no, and we have examples to prove it.
Well, thank you very much, Senator Weston. Representative Martin.
Thank you very much. Thank you to the Chamber for hosting this forum today. And thank you, Senator Weston, for your experience. I am coming into the legislature for the first time, but I have been someone who's been involved in this. I actually worked as a private citizen on the first Tabor initiative in 2006. Mr. Bowen mentioned that he was a big picture guy, and I am too. But I'm also an empiricist, a person who looks at empirical data. And I want to caution the people of Maine to avoid falling into sound bites and slogans. Coming from a marketing background, it's very easy to come up with a nice catchphrase and a slogan that sounds real good. And having a slogan that you can vote on any tax increase sounds really nice. But what we're not talking about is the flawed formula that will be imposed should this measure pass. We have 20 plus states in the nation that have all rejected Tabor. In 2006 alone, there were 20 states that had this on the ballot. Every single one of them said no. And why did they do that? Because they looked at the one state that we have to look as an example. And I, too, have been visited by several legislators from Colorado. In fact, all of them Republican. The chair of the Finance Committee in Colorado under Tabor, Republican State Senator Steve Johnson, was in Maine. And the thing in following him around and listening to him talk to business groups and associations that really struck me was the unintended consequences of Tabor, of putting in a formula that does not work. It is based on a formula that says that state government and the services and the money that is spent there is no different than what is spent in your household. And that's simply not true. The reality is that the services provided by state government increase at a faster rate than the services that we buy in our homes, like cars and food. And that is just the reality. I mean, we in our homes are not building schools. We're not repaving interstates and highways. We're not responsible for making sure the snow is plowed from the roads so that people can get to work. So as we carry forward with this discussion and this debate, I look forward to getting into the real details and making sure that all of you can make the best informed decisions possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Each of our panelists will now have up to 90 seconds